it needs to be said. I can relate to that young lady, and I felt for her.
Mm-hmm.
I know what it's like to be hated. I know what it's like to be a Black woman and hated because of my color.
Yeah. In Caitlin's game that night against the Phoenix Mercury player Alyssa Thomas lodged her fist into Caitlin's neck in a play where no foul was called during the game.
Alyssa Thomas, that's what she does. She uses her body.
What would happen if one of the greatest basketball players ever witnessed the most gifted young athlete in the WNBA being singled out? Through dubious means. Because of Cheryl Miller's startling remarks, you will discover the basketball world has completely changed as a result of Alyssa Thomas's actions against Caitlin Clark. Let me ask you a question first, though. Have you ever witnessed a top athlete go through the kind of prejudice that Caitlin Clark has encountered during her professional life? Cheryl Miller's observations during her perception of the WNBA has completely changed as a result of the Phoenix Mercury game. Alyssa Thomas is heartbroken by this part of Cheryl Miller's viewpoint. Right now, Caitlin Clark is precisely where Cheryl Miller is. From 1982 to 1986, Cheryl Miller was the best player in a league full of amazing athleticism, and opponents attempted to physically scare her since they are unable to match her exceptional basketball intelligence. However, Cheryl Miller highlighted this important point. To this point, Alyssa Thomas's reputation becomes intriguing. Cheryl Miller is aware of the discrepancy between her observations of competitive basketball and her experiences with Clark at the level of a championship. "It was the most cowardly act I've seen on a basketball court," she said, "in many years." Yes, you heard correctly.
There seems to be something involved in this girl, and there's an elevated level of physicality that obviously compromised her availability last season where she missed a few games. There is a palpable resentment towards this girl, where you have people who are resenting of her star power and her cachet, and as a result, if they have an opportunity to go at her, they're going to take it. Now, Caitlin Clark is no innocent bystander.
Cheryl Miller watched the video of Alyssa Thomas pushing Clark from behind as she struggled to deal with being stabbed. She responded swiftly and forcefully in the eye point, one of the few people in basketball history who actually. This woman, who faced well-known opponents, had a clear understanding of what genuine competitive fire looked like. During the course of her remarkable career, however, even she could comprehend that Alyssa Thomas's actions was unacceptable in terms of competitive integrity and sportsmanship. However, pay attention to what Cheryl Miller has to comment on the timing of that shove. The realization has left Alyssa Thomas completely devastated. Please like and subscribe to the channel before we proceed. If you haven't already, let's go back to the story now. The basketball player brought up a topic that many fans have been considering, but no one with her degree of notoriety was brave enough to accomplish it. Is not the same to make crude remarks about someone while they are fully exposed and not looking as playing defense at the championship level. Cheryl Miller highlighted that her era was seen as one of the most physically demanding eras in women's basketball history. When you didn't agree with someone, you acted like a predator without waiting for their back to turn. Rather, you confronted them like a fighter. And that's precisely what made Alyssa Thomas's heinous deeds so disgusting to Cheryl Miller. But as of right now, Alyssa Thomas's reputation has been totally ruined by Cheryl Miller's comments. The pitiful response of Alyssa Thomas. The basketball legend was very enraged by the occurrence. Rather than admitting that, Alyssa Thomas may have overreached herself or expressed regret when she wrongly stated that fans and the media were unjustly denouncing her. She said, "Damned if I do, damned if I don't." However, after hearing such remarks, Cheryl Miller grew even more enraged. According to Cheryl Miller, the champions and legends of the game, competitors that are truly exceptional always accept full responsibility for their acts, particularly when such actions could seriously endanger another player. She claimed that it made her think of athletes who knew deep down that they couldn't. When she witnessed Alyssa Thomas play the victim and evade criticism, she decided to compete at the greatest level. Consequently, they discovered other dubious methods to influence the game. Put differently, because Alyssa Thomas doesn't have the. Cheryl Miller was successful in depicting her as a mediocre basketball player with real skills to match higher potential. Player who uses unscrupulous methods. Caitlin Clark's exceptional skills are currently emphasized by Cheryl Miller's analysis, which is really impressive. Clark has the same special traits that made her one of the best basketball players. Cheryl Miller claims that the greatest basketball IQ in history, unexplainable clutch shooting ability, and most importantly, a heavenly vision to make everyone around her better. However, being a fan of basketball ethics, she also notices something that truly worries her. This young athlete with such promise needs to be continuously on. Instead of concentrating solely on satisfying her limitless desires, keep an eye out for cheap shots and dirty techniques. Basketball potential. According to Cheryl Miller, Alyssa Thomas's strategy embodies all that is wrong with certain players' decision to play Clark rather than trying to outwork or match her emotional talent level. Her on the court via commitment and planning. The fact that she is physically abused when she is at her weakest. Cheryl Miller claims that this conduct is the worst basketball competition she has ever witnessed. However, Cheryl Miller's controversial remarks became the focus of the basketball community. Cheryl Miller likened Clark's situation to her own encounters with physical harassment at work. But she wasn't afraid to draw attention to anything that supports Clark and provides the right context. Her circumstances. She noted that Clark, who is only 22 years old, is facing even greater hardship, more than most athletes experience in their lifetime. She also bears the burden of being the unquestioned face of basketball for women. However, Cheryl Miller's statement regarding Alyssa Thomas's prospects in the league, which is presently making the rounds on social media, which is ridiculous. According to Cheryl Miller, if the WNBA permits females like Alyssa Thomas to pursue superstars without facing consequences, it conveys the idea that average players can resort to immoral means in order to stay relevant rather than enhancing their real basketball skills. According to her, this sets a risky precedent that can discourage athletes who are raising the standard for the league. Cheryl Miller even asserted that the league's young athletes who watch at home are duped when these activities are not sufficiently punished. Rather than instructing children on how to choose poor opponents, she thinks that viewing the WNBA should teach children about dedication, skill, as well as sportsmanship. However, Cheryl Miller's forecast was arguably the most important aspect of her entire presentation. About Clark's prospects in spite of these obstacles. She claimed that hardship shaped Clark and that every inexpensive shot, shady maneuver, and attempt to frighten her simply strengthened her resolve to demonstrate her dominance only by talent. Cheryl Miller likened Clark's circumstances to her own freshman season, when opponents continuously put her physical stamina to the test. She emphasized that the difference is that Clark is managing, together with the unprecedented media attention and obligations that come with being the most marketable athlete in WNBA background. Cheryl Miller's support for Clark is crucial because of this. She is defending more than simply as a talented athlete, she is defending the core integrity of basketball. According to her perspective, Caitlin Elizabeth Clark represents all the characteristics, talent, vision, class, and competitiveness that make basketball unique. She also sees everything in athletes like Alyssa Thomas that could be harmful to the sport. The seasoned basketball player demonstrated that the WNBA is at a critical juncture. There are two choices for them. Either they continue to permit weaker. They either shield and highlight their greatest players or employ dishonest tactics to remain relevant. Players, allowing individuals like Clark to realize their full potential and enhance the league overall. Cheryl Miller made it very obvious that the decision made will determine the league's destiny. However, this is the query that everyone is talking about it. Will the WNBA defend Caitlin as suggested by Cheryl Miller, Clark? Or will they keep letting athletes like Alyssa Thomas damage the league's image through dubious means? Let's carry on the discussion in the designated comments section below. How do you feel about Cheryl Miller's severe critique of Alyssa Thomas's actions? Is she being overly critical, in your opinion? Or do you believe that her concerns are entirely valid? More significantly, do you think the WNBA will ultimately relocate to safeguard its biggest star? Please share your opinions in the designated comment section. Below, I read each and every one of them. If you'd want to see more breakthrough insights like this, make sure to click the subscribe button and turn on the notification to avoid the clutter and learn what's actually going on in basketball. Bell. Caitlin Clark's situation could be impacted by Cheryl Miller's divisive remarks in the WNBA. The basketball community is keeping an eye on this problem. As this story develops, one thing becomes more difficult to ignore. A single game, a single severe foul, or a single controversial occurrence are no longer the exclusive topics of discussion. It has to do with the future of women's basketball, the standards the league wants to uphold, and the treatment of its best players when they are visible to the public. Caitlin Clark had to contend with expectations that few athletes faced prior to joining the WNBA have ever encountered. Every game she plays is watched by millions of fans. Every action she takes is scrutinized.